Welcome to the Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day. Today's tip: 3 companies on the scrappy tactics they used to scale up. So, you started up. Now you need to scale up, but be careful to do so both effectively and cost-effectively. Entrepreneurs will usually look to grow once they've plotted a path toward profitability, accrued enough loyal customers, and reached a sustainable revenue path, according to the financial services platform Stripe. To scale, a company must increase revenue without substantially increasing costs. Its ability to do so will determine how it can increase its client base and boost profits. And with limited capital and resources, entrepreneurs will need to consider the scrappiest ways to get where you need to go, says Karen O'Connor, a clinical associate professor of strategy at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management and an investor. While the right approach will differ for every company, it could be wise to consider strategic, out-of-the-box approaches to help your business grow. Here's how 3 startups did it. Before jumping headfirst into scaling mode, you need to ensure that you fully understand your market, O'Connor says. You can waste a lot of money trying to grow in a market that you didn't want your product or doesn't understand it. Thus, try to test your business model in low-capital, low-risk ways before you try to grow, O'Connor adds. That's the approach that Will Coleman, 39, took with Alto, the Dallas-based rideshare company he co-founded in 2018. He and his co-founder strategically chose to start their business in Dallas, where the costs of hiring drivers and even paying speeding tickets are lower than in other major cities, he says. Additionally, fine-tuning the company's model in Dallas helped them shift gears more effectively when the pandemic killed 95% of Alto's revenue in 2020. Quickly, the company needed to expand into other markets to reach a wider swath of consumers, and it worked. Today, Alto is operating in Los Angeles, Miami, Houston, Dallas, and DC. And from 2021 to 2022, the company's revenue surged 241%. But once you start to scale, you need to quickly recognize mistakes and embrace tough decisions to maximize your growth trajectory, Coleman says. In July, Alto pulled out of San Francisco, where it had been operating for a year. Facing stronger headwinds in the city than in any of its other markets, Alto wasn't seeing the right return on investment, he says, and the team chose to maximize efforts in other areas. Have a clear plan, but be willing to change it, Coleman says, and use every piece of information you can to inform that decision as quickly as possible. When developing a growth strategy, evaluate the costs, but also the other challenges facing competitors in your market to see how you might circumvent them. When Fawn Weaver, 47, started Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey in 2016, she saw independent spirit brands dying at the hands of big distributors who didn't do enough to help those brands grow, she says. So instead of banking on one distributor, she built a network of various distributors, and she expanded state by state. Most small spirit brands, they're working with one distributor. I'm working with 17, Weaver says. This network allowed her to keep these distributors honest, comparing their sales numbers against each other to push for better support. Within 2 years, Weaver scaled Uncle Nearest's distribution to all 50 states, and this year, Uncle Nearest projects $200 million in revenue. When you're an independent, you don't have any power unless you make that power, Weaver says. Taking a more unconventional route will likely require more work. Working with 17 distributors means navigating 17 different systems instead of one, Weaver says. So she has a chief business officer and 2 senior vice presidents dedicated to managing those relationships. Still, she says, the effort is worth it and has allowed her company to flourish. Every industry is going to have a different solution. You just have to be willing to do the hard part, Weaver says. Scaling requires onboarding new team members, managing capital, increasing marketing efforts, and more. And you might find yourself in over your head. Instead of trying to chase every opportunity, define exactly who you want to target and how, O'Connor says. You have to figure out which are the best opportunities and take your time doing that. For GreenPal, the Nashville, Tennessee-based on-demand lawn mowing platform, marketing efforts fell flat for the first few years after the company's founding in 2012, says co-founder and CEO Brian Clayton, 43. The company poured thousands of dollars into paid campaigns with paltry results. Still, in its 6th year, the company doubled down on its search engine optimization tactics and content marketing. How do we carpet the internet with our content? And how do we tune that content to solve people's problems? And then how do we spread word of mouth? Clayton says. Clayton hired freelance writers and ultimately a full-time SEO professional, who he says made more than his own CEO salary. It took about 10 to 12 months for the results to materialize. But then GreenPal moved up from the 8th or 9th spot on the search engine results page to the top 3 slots. Signups, meanwhile, went from about 500 per day to 1,000. The company recently surpassed $30 million in annual revenue. GreenPal saw success because it narrowed its focus and went all in on that approach, Clayton contends. Be willing to throw everything you got at it, he says, and then be willing to play the long game. That's it from Inc. Check back weekday mornings at 6 a.m. Eastern for more tips from Inc.